Good morning, all. It's now 10:01 in Washington, D.C., and the hearing of the Readiness Committee is called to order. First, some administrative and technical notes. Members are reminded that they must be visible on screen within the software platform for the purpose of identifying verification. Members must continue to use the software platform's video function while attending the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the members unable to fully participate on camera. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact the committee staff for assistance. If I experience technical difficulties during the hearing, Mr. Courtney, heads up, you have agreed, whether you know it or not, to take the gavel until I can reconnect. When you are recognized, video will be broadcast via the television and internet feeds. You will be recognized as normal for questions. But if you want to speak at another time, you must seek recognition verbally. Please mute your microphones when you are not speaking, and remember to unmute prior to speaking. Please be aware that there is a slight lag between when you start to speak and when the camera shot switches to you. Please remember to keep the software platform's video function on for the entirety of the time you are attending this hearing. If you leave for a short period for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, please leave your video function on. If you are leaving to join a different proceeding or will be absent for a significant period of time, you should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin when you return. Be advised that I've designated a committee staff member to mute unrecognized members' microphones if necessary. We understand background noises such as children, and this will be particularly important for Mr. Waltz, dogs, cats, other background noises. We usually accept that. However, if it gets too much, we'll mute you. Please use the platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues. Finally, you will see a 5-minute countdown clock on the software platform's display. Please pay attention to it, but if necessary, I will remind you as appropriate. I also ask all of you for unanimous consent that non-committee members, if any, will be allowed to participate in today's hearing after all committee members have had an opportunity to speak and to ask questions. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Now, with that in mind, a few opening remarks. I'm still looking out on the screen here and I don't see it, but I'm going to go ahead and move forward. For all of you, we have a new ranking member for the Subcommittee on Readiness. Mr. Mike Waltz from Florida will be joining the committee. He has had an extraordinary event over the weekend, the birth of a child. And so, okay, you won the lottery, Mr. Green.
John, I'm on here.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on the birth of the child, and congratulations on becoming ranking member. Before I turn to you for whatever very, very short statement you would like to say about joining the committee, I'm going to talk basically to Mr. Lamborn. Doug, you've been with this committee a long time. I'm not sure whether you will continue on the committee, but you've been an extraordinary fellow to work with, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to do that over these last 3 years. Hopefully you'll continue as a member of the Readiness Summit. I know that you're also moving over to ranking member on strategic forces. So with that, Doug, if you have some quick remarks, the floor is yours.
Well, John, first of all, I want to thank you. You've been great to work with. I've been a colleague of yours on this committee for more than 10 years, and I've seen time and time again here in Washington, D.C., in committee, in full committee, on the floor, and all over the world as we've had briefings military related. You really have a heart to support the military, to make sure that our men and women are the best equipped and trained in the world. And I just really commend your patriotism, and it's been a pleasure to work with you every step of the way. Well, almost every step of the way, I should say.
Well,
we've had a few disagreements.
Doug, the same to you, and really enjoyed the time we've headed up this committee.
And John, if I could also just real quickly, I want to thank my staff, Ian, Whitney, and all of the professional staff for the great work they've done. I want to welcome Mike Waltz onto the committee and as ranking member. I know he'll do a fantastic job, and I look forward to being a colleague of his as I move over as ranking member, like you said, on this Strategic Forces Subcommittee. And lastly, Readiness Committee is a wonderful subcommittee. It has almost a $300 billion portfolio, and that's just critical in this day and age as we look at the need for our military to continue to be the best in the world. And so it's a wonderful assignment. I'm happy to have participated. John, back to you.
Thank you, Doug. Mike, you will have an opening statement in a few moments, but if you'd like to address the committee briefly about your new assignment, please do so.
Well, as I've talked to many of you, being on this committee is one of the primary reasons I ran for Congress. And being on armed services, I think the #1 job of the federal government, in my personal opinion, is to keep the country safe. And I can't think of any more noble calling than to make sure the men and women downrange right now, as we speak, who are dependent on us to make the right decisions and conduct appropriate oversight to make sure they have the training, equipment, and the resources that they need. So just really, truly, my honor in every sense of the word.
Well, welcome, Mike. Thank you very much for joining us and for taking on this task. Look forward to working with you. With that, we best move on to my opening statement, and then we'll follow Mike with your opening statement. Today, we're here to talk about the Red Hill Fuel Storage Facility at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Not only will we delve into the recent fuel releases from this facility, the subsequent contamination of drinking water that sickened thousands of people, displaced thousands more, and the Navy's response to all of this. But we will also discuss the broader issues of whether it is possible to make Red Hill safe enough for continued operation. In addition, we will begin the conversation about whether long-term continued operations is the best use of taxpayer resources. Before we get into the recent event, it is worth starting from a common framework of reference. Well, why does Red Hill exist in the first place? Even before the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States had grown concern about the vulnerability of above-ground fuel storage tanks. In 1940, the construction began on the Red Hill Bulk Fuel Storage Facility, a one-of-a-kind engineering innovation that would secure the fuel from enemy aerial attack. The facility holds 250 million gallons of fuel in 20 steel-lined underground tanks encased in concrete. These tanks are connected to 3 gravity-fed pipelines running 2.5 miles to Pearl Harbor fuel piers. However, a statistic less commonly quoted by the DoD is that the facility is also 100 feet above the groundwater aquifer that provides water to the residents of Oahu. Thus, it has always been the responsibility of the military to ensure that these tanks are maintained in a manner that not only protects the wartime fuel supply, but the people of Oahu's water supply. In January 2014, 27,000 gallons of fuel were released from one of the 12.5 million gallon storage tanks due to an operator error during routine operations. Since then, the Navy has been under an order by the EPA and the Hawaii Department of Health to modernize and to make safe the 80-year-old facility. The Department of Defense has spent hundreds of millions of dollars to update the facility, the technologies and operating procedures at Red Hill. During the time between the 2014 release and the most recent releases last year, the Navy repeatedly stated that these investments would ensure that Oahu's drinking water was safe. Unfortunately, as we have watched this crisis unfold over the last 3 months, it is apparent that that was not the case. While the Red Hill facility was an astounding feat of engineering in the 1940s, is it still the right solution for near-peer contest in the mid-2000s? Can billions of dollars of United States taxpayer money be asked to invest in this facility? Could it be better used in finding a new innovative engineering feat for this millennium, suitable for modern warfare? Many of these questions are best answered by the combatant commanders and the Pentagon when we have follow-up classified hearings. So, gentlemen, we're not going to go into the solutions in great detail today, other than making sure that we talk specifically about Red Hill and its operations. Beyond that, it'll be rather general. Today, our focus is on the immediate crisis. What went wrong? What are we doing to fix the trust that the Navy has broken with the people of Hawaii? How have you, the Navy, addressed the needs of the sickened and displaced military families? How are you, the Navy, conducting cleanup? And is there a pathway to bring Red Hill operations back online in the near term? In addition to answering the current crisis, we will also be laying the groundwork for our follow-on discussions about Red Hill's long-term future. Specifically, is it possible to operate Red Hill safely? What will it cost? The answers to these questions will be critical in determining the answer to the ultimate question. Given the likely multi-billion-dollar price tag that will be associated with making the Red Hill facility safe for long-term continued operation, is there a better use of taxpayer funds that will more closely align with the contested logistics challenges of the Pacific? With that, I would like to turn to our new ranking member, Mr. Waltz of Florida, for your remarks.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thanks for having this important hearing on the recent fuels release in the military's drinking water system in Hawaii. I understand that many of our witnesses are participating remotely from Hawaii. I certainly want to thank them for getting up at dark 30, as we call it, participating in this important event. So, as the chairman rightly stated, the Red Hill Fuels Depot has been at the center of our bulk fuels logistics effort in Indo-PACOM since World War II. It's been the source of repeated fuels incidents and is lacking a secondary containment system. It's particularly problematic considering that it sits 100 feet over an aquifer that provides over 77% of the island of Oahu's drinking water. I believe the existing Red Hill fuel situation is unacceptable and a significant change to our bulk fuels laydown and the overall management system in Indo-PACOM needs to occur. In response to the Red Hill disaster, I understand that the Hawaii delegation has asked the Secretary of the Navy to entirely defuel the Red Hill Fuels Depot. I am somewhat concerned that any long-term effort to entirely defuel Red Hill will have some significant national security consequences. But I am supportive of initially defueling Red Hill to a level that supports our surge requirements. And additionally, the defueling of this depot at a future point should be aggressively pursued when a better positioned fuel strategy is developed and implemented, one that's better aligned with our overall combatant commanders' war plans. Finally, I want to express my concern that the initial reporting associated with the Red Hill fuel spill, it's incredibly important to take care of our service members and their families. I think that is the least we can do, frankly, given their sacrifices. And while I do think that the Navy recovered in providing some much needed transparency, the initial response to the ongoing tragedy needs to be significantly more responsive, or any type of tragedy like this needs to be more responsive and forthright, frankly, as to the magnitude of the environmental disaster. Again, we owe no less to the service members and their families. In closing, I do again want to thank the chairman for this hearing. It's obvious we have much work to do on this issue. I look forward to further discussion. I certainly look forward to the classified briefing and discussion around that briefing as we work towards the NDAA for FY 2023. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waltz. We'll now turn to the witnesses. I will introduce them all at once, and then I believe Rear Admiral Converse will conduct the participation of the 5 witnesses. First, we have Rear Admiral Blake Converse, Deputy Commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, Vice Admiral Yancey Lindsay, Commander of the Navy Installation Command, Rear Admiral John Gorka, Commander, Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, and Rear Admiral Peter Stampopoulos, Commander of the Navy Supply Command, and Captain, hang on, Captain, got to change pages here. Captain Michael McGinnis, Pacific Fleet Surgeon, U.S. Pacific Fleet. Gentlemen, your formal testimony will be put into the hearing record, and I would commend to all the members that they read the full written testimony when they have a chance to do that if they've not already done so. With that, Admiral Converse, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, sir. And good morning. I am Blake Converse. I am the Deputy Commander at U.S. Pacific Fleet, and I was the commander of the Joint Crisis Action Team, which stood up to combat this crisis. Chairman Garamendi, Representative Ranking Member Waltz, and distinguished members of the HASS Subcommittee on Readiness, thank you for the opportunity to be prepared before you today. Your strong support for the work we do ensures our Navy has the capability to carry out vital missions around the world to protect and advance the national security interests of the United States. The support of Congress is vitally important today as the Navy takes action to resolve the contamination of the Navy's drinking water system on Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. I want to start by saying that the Navy caused this problem. We own it, and we're going to fix it. Nothing is more important than the health, the safety, and the well-being of our families, our military residents, our neighbors, and the communities that we call home. I'm keenly aware of how this has impacted the military families as well as the local citizens of Hawaii, including my own. I've lived in Hawaii on and off for over 8 years. My father called Hawaii home. In fact, he worked for and eventually retired from the University of Hawaii. And my brother grew up on these islands. So I understand the deep connection that the people of Hawaii, particularly the Native Hawaiian community, have with the lands and the waters of Hawaii. We owe it to them to be good stewards of the land that has been entrusted to us. I'd like to quickly recount the events associated with the water contamination incident. Beginning on November 28th, residents of certain neighborhoods on our Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam here in Hawaii and the military housing began reporting vapors, discoloration, and contamination of the water provided by the Navy. The Red Hill Shaft well, which sits near the Navy's Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility, was immediately suspected to be the source of this contamination, as that was the source of the drinking water for those affected neighborhoods. So it was shut down that evening, November 28th, and it has remained isolated since that day. Later, samples from the Red Hill Shaft well would confirm the presence of petroleum contaminants. As an immediate response to that crisis, Commander U.S. Pacific Fleet, Admiral Sam Paparo, my boss, convened a joint crisis action team on the November 29th, the very next day, and he appointed me the deputy commander to lead that team and directed me to focus on meeting the immediate needs of our impacted residents, restoring safe drinking water, and remediating the Red Hill Shaft well. Once the Joint Crisis Action Team had completed immediate actions to isolate the source of contamination and provide public health guidance, drinking water, and lodging support to the affected residents, Admiral Paparo revised that order, expanded our recovery effort to a whole of Navy and DoD effort by bringing in appropriate Echelon 2 Navy commands and those are the members sitting here with me to testify, and assigning each of those commanders clear lines of operation to direct their actions. We also formalized a joint and interagency response effort together with the EPA, the Hawaii Department of Health, and senior representatives from each of the military services that were affected. The Commander U.S. Pacific Fleet, as the senior officer present, retains command of the overall recovery effort across all the lines of operation, with support of the designated Echelon 2 commands with me today and the interagency team that we formed. Among the witnesses today are the commanders of those Echelon 2 commands that we directed to assume overall lead for both planning and execution. Further, as the Navy senior officer present, my boss, Admiral Paparo, was best postured to direct and supervise an independent and comprehensive investigation into Red Hill. U.S. Pacific Fleet Commander is not in the chain of command that operates or maintains Red Hill. So immediately after the November 20th fuel spill at the fuel facility, Admiral Paparo directed a nuclear-trained admiral to conduct a judge advocate general's investigation of that spill, and to look for any linkage to the earlier 6 May fuel spill at Red Hill. After residents on the Navy's water system began reporting contamination shortly after we had directed that investigation, Admiral Paparo expanded the scope of that investigation to determine whether those recent fuel spills had contributed to or had caused the water contamination in the Navy's water supply system. So that holistic investigation of the fuel spills and the water contamination will be submitted to PAC Fleet on or about the 14th of January, later this week. Recently, the Pacific Fleet Commander, on the 7th of January, issued a tasking order directing actions to fully comply with the Hawaii Department of Health emergency order associated with Red Hill. This includes developing plans and taking actions to remediate and restore the Red Hill shaft well, contracting for independent third-party assessments to restore Red Hill to operation, and making preparations to defuel the facility. All of those efforts are in progress. The water contamination at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam has required an intense and collaborative effort between the Navy, our other military service partners on the island who are also residents of our base housing, the Hawaii Department of Health and Department of Land and Natural Resources, the U.S. EPA, and the many local, state, and federal legislators that have stepped in to provide assistance and guidance in our process. This teamwork has produced a comprehensive water system recovery plan that is currently in execution. We're grateful for the partnership, the expertise, and the perspective of our federal, state, and local government officials, and our Native Hawaiian leaders. They are tremendous advocates for the community. So I want to thank this subcommittee. I want to thank Hawaii's congressional delegation for their support and ongoing commitment to resolve the Navy's drinking water contamination. We recognize how much these events impacted the lives of so many, and we are firmly committed to restoring safe drinking water in a manner that builds trust and protects the land and the waters of Hawaii. Our joint team will not rest until everyone in the Navy's drinking water system has access to safe drinking water and the Red Hill shaft well has been cleaned up and restored. I look forward to your questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Vice Admiral Lindsay now.
Good morning, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Waltz, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to join my fellow Navy colleagues here today. It is my distinct honor to represent the U.S. Navy, as well as the sailors and civilians who directly support the mission of Commander, Navy Installations Command. Fulfilling the mission of the Navy Shore Enterprise would not be possible without your continued support. While most of our discussion today will focus on the drinking water contamination at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam and the steps being taken to restore it to drinkable standards, I want to assure you that your Navy, in cooperation with our sister services and federal and state agencies, is addressing this issue with utmost urgency. It is our collective goal to restore the drinking water system, ensure environmental compliance, and coordinate regulatory actions, and respond appropriately and expeditiously to the concerns and needs of our impacted residents and families while continuing to support and execute the Navy's mission. The Navy will continue to dedicate significant funding and personnel to these efforts. We recognize this unfortunate event has negatively impacted the day-to-day lives of many families who rely on the Navy's drinking water system and has caused them much distress and heartache. While in Hawaii over these past 4 weeks, working the Navy's response, I spoke to many of our sailors, soldiers, and their families. I listened to their concerns, and we responded to their needs. I, along with my fellow colleagues here, will not relent until all personnel and their families are back in their homes and we've restored safe drinking water across the Navy's water system. A few of the immediate actions that were taken with our sister services and non-federal entities to support affected personnel and their families include enabling temporary lodging for those in need, including a number of contracted local hotels, continued to distribute bottled water and bulk water on a daily basis, stood up an emergency family assistance center and call center, established alternate shower and laundry services in several housing areas, provided bottled and or bulk water to off-base residents, schools, etc. on the Navy's drinking water system, and facilitated support to personnel and their families through the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, Armed Services YMCA, USO, and Navy League, among others, including local businesses and community groups looking to help. These are only a few of the resources and services that have been provided to the 9,000 plus households affected by the drinking water contamination. There's nothing more important than the health and safety of the people and the community that relies on our drinking water system. Therefore, we will continue to move forward aggressively and deliberately, make adjustments, and apply other services as appropriate to help address their needs. It is also our goal to ensure environmental compliance every step of the way. Therefore, we remain committed to working closely with our partners at the Hawaii Department of Health, Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and other state and federal agencies, alongside our sister services, as we restore the Navy's water system and conduct Red Hill well remediation efforts. We understand the importance of being good stewards of the environment, and it is our goal to restore the people's trust and confidence in our ability and commitment to protect the environment, including the vital sources of drinking water we all depend upon. Before I close, I would like to thank the hundreds of military members, civilians, and contractors who have been working literally around the clock to help the Navy address and resolve this issue, and the nonprofit organizations and members of the community who have supported those in need. I want to also thank this committee for their continued support, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're going to pass it off to Admiral Corker. Are you next?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Walsh, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to join you today. As Commander, U.S. Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, or NAVFAC, I am responsible for providing engineering, design and construction, acquisition, and expeditionary expertise and support across the Department of the Navy. NAVFAC is also responsible and accountable for the operations and maintenance of the Navy's drinking water system on Oahu. I want to assure you that I fully recognize the severity of the current water crisis and its impact to the residents of Hawaii, some who are dear friends of my family and I. From 2015 to 2018, my family and I lived on the Makalapa compound in Navy housing. We are grateful to have built lifelong connections in the community through our children's attendance at Damie Memorial School and as parishioners of St. Elizabeth Catholic Church in Aiea. To this day, we cherish our Ohana experience. Since returning to Hawaii on December 7th, I have reconnected with friends and understand the concerns they have voiced about the Red Hill incident. This is a personal issue for me, and I am sorry. As an immediate response to the crisis, Commander, U.S. Pacific Fleet Admiral Paparo charged me with the specific responsibilities to restore the water distribution system, remediate the Red Hill well, and protect the aquifer. To address these lines of operations, the entire Navy team has responded with a sense of urgency. However, we are not doing this alone. Our efforts are being performed in collaboration and coordination with state, federal, and DoD partners, including the Hawaii Department of Health and EPA Region 9. Their expertise has been instrumental in the response and recovery, and I commend their dedicated mutual commitment to our ongoing actions. I fully envision this collaborative partnership will continue into the future. The Navy has a comprehensive and transparent recovery plan, and we are executing our mission. My written testimony provides specific actions taken today, and I am prepared to discuss them in greater detail during this hearing. The importance of restoring safe drinking water is absolute. Our service members, civilian workforce, families, and the local community who support the military are our greatest assets. I pledge my commitment to continue to work alongside other service counterparts and our regulatory partners to deliver safe drinking water, return our families to their homes, remediate the Red Hill well, and protect the aquifer. I thank the leadership and membership of this committee for your continued commitment, interest, and support. It is a high honor to work with each of you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. I think we're now going to hear from Admiral Stamanopoulos.
Good morning, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Waltz, and members of the Readiness Subcommittee. I am Rear Admiral Peter Stamatopoulos, and I am the commander of the Naval Supply Systems Command located in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you to discuss the Red Hill water contamination in Hawaii, and thank you for your continued support of our military and their families. By way of background, the mission of the Naval Supply Systems Command, or NAVSUP, is to conduct and enable supply chain, acquisition, and operational logistics to generate readiness and sustain naval forces worldwide. NAVSUP oversees 11 subordinate commands. Through one of its subordinate commands, NAVSUP Fleet Logistics Center, Pearl Harbor, it directs and manages the day-to-day fueling operations within the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. This is done in coordination with other commands to include Commander Naval Installations Command, or CNIC, and the Naval Facilities Engineering Command, NAVFAC, as well as with the Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA. It is a team effort to safely run this critical infrastructure facility and to illustrate in our various responsibilities in the most simplistic way, it can be likened to a very, very large and complex industrial petroleum plant. DLA is the parent company. CNIC owns the property. NAVSUP moves the petroleum, and NAVFAC, along with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, performs maintenance and repairs of the plant. In response to the water crisis at Red Hill, NAVSUP deployed its Enterprise Logistics Response Team to assist efforts providing support to affected families and residents, restoring the water distribution system with safe drinking water, and remediating the Red Hill water well. We delivered over 800,000 gallons of bottled and bulk water to 44 distribution sites. We contracted for hygiene stations, laundry services, and hotel rooms. And we are progressing towards fulfilling the SECNAV and congressional requirements to include conducting an outside third-party assessment of the facility. To ensure we are leveraging the appropriate industry experts, we consulted with oil and gas executives and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and will be awarding a contract for an independent assessment of the operations and systems integrity at the Red Hill bulk fuel facility. As you are aware, Commander U.S. Pacific Fleet has appointed an investigation into the operations, maintenance, safety, and oversight at the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. Additionally, in coordination with Navy leadership in front of you today, I convened a safety investigation board to identify causes for the incident and to develop appropriate corrective actions in order to reduce unnecessary risks to people and our resources. The results of the Navy's investigations, coupled with the outside assessment, will provide us with a multi-dimensional view of how the Navy can operate the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility to a higher standard. My number one priority is ensuring that operations at Red Hill are conducted in the safest possible manner. I will remain transparent with the people of Hawaii and Congress. I will continue supporting all investigations and assessments, and am committed to protect and preserve the Hawaiian environment. Additionally, I am committed to a culture of get real, get better, and in pursuing a culture that is self-assessing, self-correcting, and learning. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss these issues with you today, and I look forward to fielding your questions.
Thank you very much, Admiral. In your testimony, you laid out who's responsible for the various activities. I'd like you, your staff, and our staff to get that down clearly so that we know how to deal with accountability. I now turn to Captain Michael McGinnis, Pacific Fleet Surgeon, U.S. Pacific Fleet. Captain.
Good morning, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Waltz, and members of the Readiness Subcommittee. It's an honor for me to appear before you. I'm Captain Michael McGinnis, the U.S. Pacific Fleet Surgeon and Senior Medical Advisor. I was born and raised in a Navy family, attended medical school at the University of Virginia, and received a Master in Public Health from the University of North Carolina. I trained in the Navy in internal medicine. I have served in a diverse range of assignments globally, including as Senior Medical Officer aboard the USS Nimitz, as Commanding Officer of the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, and as the Naval Forces Europe, Naval Forces Africa, and Sixth Fleet Surgeon. I am the head of the Joint Health Services Working Group in support of the PAC Fleet Crisis Action Team. Our priority is the safety and well-being of all served by the Navy water distribution system. The Joint Health Services Working Group understands we need to get this right for our families and the people of Hawaii. We have a robust joint and interagency response to this crisis. Senior leaders and experts from the military health system, together with the Hawaii Department of Health, are providing evidence-based, comprehensive medical support for all of our families. At the outset of the public health emergency, our joint military medical team established medical outreach locations within our neighborhoods to provide medical screening and counseling. We received over 130 medical subject matter experts and experienced personnel from the Joint Medical Force. Navy Medicine deployed teams within 12 hours of notification to enhance our medical support to our community. Included were environmental health, public health, toxicology, and water quality experts. Our medical teams have screened over 5,900 patients during this event. The vast majority were conducted within the first 2 weeks of our response. Patients' symptoms were consistent with an acute environmental exposure event. Patients' symptoms consistent with the following: nausea, vomiting, headache, diarrhea, skin or eye irritation. Once patients were removed from the water source, the symptoms rapidly resolved. We are committed to working tirelessly to assist every person that has been impacted by this issue, understand their concerns, and provide the appropriate medical care that they deserve. I appreciate and thank you for your commitment and enduring support to our service members and our families. I'm standing by for your questions.
Thank you, and for all of the witnesses, thank you for your testimony. I'm going to read the gavel order so that the members can be prepared for their turn at questions. I will start, followed by Mr. Waltz, Mr. Courtney, and Mr. Scott. We will then move forward, and I'll update as we go. First, there is absolutely no doubt that this is a very serious crisis, a crisis of health. The impact on the personnel, the families is extraordinary, as just testified by Captain McGinnis. And it is also a repeat of previous problems at Red Hill. I am determined that that the Navy be held accountable for what has happened and that they move expeditiously to resolve and to avoid any future problems. I already asked that we get a clear understanding of the areas of responsibility and the overall responsibility, which is now pretty clear. It lies with the commander of the Pacific Fleet. And so we will have a discussion with the commander of the fleet at some point in the future. With regard to the issues at hand, Admiral Converse, do you know why this recent spill occurred? And if not, what you are doing to determine how it happened and why it happened?
Our best information is that this recent spill was due to operator error. There's a investigation going on that I mentioned earlier that will investigate this specific spill on the November 20th, the recent spill of JP5 jet fuel. It'll look at any relationship to the 6 May spill that are indications, and the investigation concluded was also operator error. And it'll look at how they're linked to this recent water contamination issue. And I can tell you that this is being done by an officer that's independent of the chain of command of the operations, the maintenance, and the resourcing of the Red Hill facility. It's being done by a commander and with a team that has a high degree of technical expertise. And we're bringing in outside activities to support this investigation from several levels of expertise and local hydrologists and folks that are experienced in fuel distribution in a commercial area and in safety, so that we can get this right. And once we've done that, we will report out and tell you what we find. Thank you.
As I have discussed with you yesterday when we briefly met, I intend that this issue be taken up in the next year's NDAA, the work that we are now commencing. So we will need information along the way here from all of you. Keep that in mind. I am not going to allow deadlines to be waived. We're going to hold you to the deadlines that are presently laid out. I do not want another year to go by without the NDAA providing the specific authorities and money necessary to resolve this issue. With that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Kalehi for 2.5 minutes, and then we'll come back to Mr. Waltz. Excuse me, I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to turn to Mr. Waltz for his opening questions, and I'll come back to Mr. Kalehi. Mr. Waltz, please excuse me for my brief absence of proper status.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. So I'm not sure. I'll just throw this out to the panel. Who's best positioned to answer it? But my understanding is the Pacific Fleet Commander has indicated his intent to comply with the administrative order to defuel the Red Hill complex. I guess my question is just to verify that understanding. But two, secondly, is the Navy considering further options to contest the administrative order?
I'll take that, sir. So yes, we are in receipt of the emergency order issued by the Hawaii Department of Health, and we are taking action because that is a lawful order to comply with that. So on the 7th of January, Admiral Paro issued a directive to subordinate commands and within his staff to start initiating efforts. And in fact, we had already begun taking efforts as early as the beginning of December on many facets of that, based on an order by the Secretary of the Navy and just some prudent practices associated with it that would have gone, even without an order, a long way towards complying with the ultimate elements of the order. So yes, we are complying with the order. And then I am not a part of the decision-making apparatus on whether or not the Navy is going to contest that order. I don't have any information on that at this point.
Okay, so to be clear, the Navy is going to proceed with defueling in compliance with the order. But to your knowledge, as the Deputy Commander of PAC Fleet, you don't know whether the Navy will take any steps to contest the order, either in the very near term or sometime in the near future.
Yeah, so the decision on whether to contest the order has to take into account the strategic importance of Red Hill, the alternatives, and a number of factors that are associated with the combatant commander's responsibilities, and ultimately the Secretary of the Navy and OSD will have to make a decision on that. And, I am not a part of that decision making, and I don't have any information right now.
Sure. Just in the interest of time, I certainly share the chairman's concern on really getting the bottom of who's in charge, who's accountable. By my count, Admiral, forgive me, but Stamatopoulos listed 5 organizations that have, they're somehow their hand in this jar. I think that's something we need to take a hard look at. The other piece, Admiral Converse, I appreciate everybody on the panel saying they are not, the Navy is not going to rest until the well is remediated and our families have safe drinking water. But it seems to me that the approach here was that this was a one-off crisis rather than a systemic issue. And I realize we're going to have a follow-on classified brief, but understanding that this may be an opportunity to address systemic issues with the fuels laydown across Indo-PACOM, that this may be an installation issue rather than an operator issue. If it is just an operator issue, where do we have a training and operations and maintenance problem? I think we really, so far, I'm coming away with this with more questions than answers. I'll just follow up with one more, just in the interest of time. I am concerned, however, you are proceeding with the defueling of Red Hill. To the extent you could talk about it here, what will that impact have in the near term? I mean, what impact is that going to have on immediate Indo-PACOM operations?
Okay, so there will be no immediate impacts as we proceed over the next several months with the assessments and the development of the schedules and the work plans, because any decision as we move forward to take corrective actions based on the investigation that we do, complete the third-party assessments that are required to identify the corrective actions and operations and maintenance in the facilities before we do any fuel operations will take some time. And we are working with the Defense Logistics Agency, who owns the fuel and the distribution of the fuel, to support our military to provide more fidelity to the combatant commander on long-term risk. In the short term, we can manage it with our local fuel stocks and with alternate distribution methods. And then the long-term decision on the ultimate disposition of Red Hill and the distribution of the fuel will be made at the combatant commander and above level, in consultation with the Defense Logistics Agency and the military services to which that fuel is provided.
Yeah, thank you, Admiral. And I would certainly share the chairman's sentiment that I think it would be preferable for the Navy, for DLA, for OSD to very transparently and expeditiously come to the committee with your plans and drive that process rather than the committee driving the process for you. But I mean, one way or another, this is going to move forward, and the current situation is unacceptable. And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. As I said a moment ago, the current gavel order is Courtney Scott, and then we'll move beyond that. Mr. Courtney, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses, and appreciate the sincerity of all your remarks here. this morning, DC time. I would like to just note that the chairman, I think, has really had the committee on this issue for a really good month or so. And I also, as John knows, Mr. Cahaley joined us in California with Navy leadership back on December 5th, who, I just have to say, publicly is just doing an outstanding job, along with his colleagues in the Hawaii delegation, Senator Hirono, Senator Schatz, Mr. Case, who's with us here today. I honestly, I think the urgency and the acceleration of efforts which the Navy has done in December is, in my opinion, a large part due to their advocacy on behalf of their constituents. I just would like to ask a couple of questions. Admiral Converse, again, you listed a pretty impressive list of response in terms of, taking care of lodging, water distribution, family assistance center, showers, laundry. Admiral Korka, again, you described what's been, being done in terms of just, securing the actual, fueling and water distribution system. Admiral Converse, how much has this cost to date? Do we have a tally in terms of just where we stand in terms of expenditures?
So we do have a process that is estimating the cost, and then ultimately we will have a cost estimate. I can tell you that the running costs, when you consider the temporary lodging and the transportation and the leasing of all the filtering assemblies and all the other things that we've had to do to clean up the well and a water distribution system, right now the tally is well over $250 million.
Yeah, I've heard that number already being discussed, and Mr. Lamborn talked about the rather large size of the defense budget, which the readiness subcommittee has, but it is not infinite. Okay, and when you take a $250 million expenditure, which is really just an emergency expenditure, and the Navy has to eat that, that's a repair of a surface ship. That's could have been a good down payment for PSYOPs in terms of getting our dry docks repaired. And and thank you for the answer, by the way. I mean, that transparency I think is really important right now. But projecting forward, I mean, obviously the meter is going to be running for a while, and as we try to balance as a subcommittee, what are next steps, and obviously the status quo is costing us a fortune. As aside from just the human costs in terms of our Navy and Army and Air Force personnel and their families. So that's something hopefully, Mr. Chairman, moving forward, we are going to continue to get updates as this process continues. One other question, again, Admiral Converse, if it is operation error, I mean, let's just sort of hypothetically say that that's the case. On a given day and a given shift at Red Hill, what is the number of personnel that are there? How many Navy supervisors are there? How many civilian defense personnel are there? I mean, this is an incredibly sensitive fueling capacity, which Mr. Waltz, I think, really powerfully described. And obviously it's exposed and vulnerable to the water drinking. I mean, what are we doing there in terms of manning on any given day?
So the overall manning of the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility sits at about 33 active duty military and about 27 civilian employees. And on any given shift, and they operate 24/7, 8-hour shifts, it's 4 civilians on watch. And I'm going to turn to Admiral Pete Stamatopoulos, NAVSUP, who owns the operations and maintenance of that facility, to make sure I got these numbers right. Correct. Admiral Stamatopoulos.
Very close, sir. The numbers at Red Hill, to be specific, sir, the Red Hill is currently billeted for about 40 personnel. Of that 40 personnel, there are 12 watch standers, divided into 3 watch sections. So at any 24/7 hours a day, a week, a year, there are 4 watch standers, regardless of whether there are operations. The balance of the employees are conducting operator level maintenance, visual inspections, and are in the Red Hill facility, along with numerous others to include from the Naval Facilities Engineering Command, contractors. So any given day, there are quite a few people, sir. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I mean, I would just say, as a layman, that doesn't seem enough to me. But I mean, again, that's obviously something we're going to obviously process in the coming weeks. Thank you to the witnesses, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. We now turn to Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think my question will start with Admiral Corca. If I'm wrong about who could answer this, then I apologize. But we've got two issues here. One is we've got the contamination that's obviously got to be addressed and what happened there. The other is the drinking water. And my question is, the Southern Oahu basal aquifer, is there another aquifer that we could use for the drinking water for the base?
System for the Navy is comprised of about 250 miles of distribution. We actually have 7 storage tanks, and we actually have 3 pumping wells that we use. So 2 of our 3 pumping wells have been secured. And so right now we're supplying our demand through 1 pumping well that we're using today. So it has that our demand is 20 million gallons a day. And so that one that's in line represents about is handling 80% of our load right now. So that is how we're operating right now.
Okay, so 2 of the 3 then have been contaminated, and 1 is not contaminated. Is that correct?
We have contamination level in 1 of the wells, and that is at the Red Hill, is what we're discussing right now.
Right.
There's another well that is in close proximity, but in the abundance of caution and in discussion with the Board of Water Supplies, we made a decision to close that well just to make sure that it didn't become vulnerable.
Is it in a separate aquifer?
Yes, sir. It's in a separate. Yes, sir.
Okay. But it would be possible then to use the 2 wells, assuming that they were not contaminated, if Hawaii agrees and our testing shows that those 2 wells are safe for our people. Is it possible then to use those wells to supply the water that our men and women need on base?
We can supply it, sir, but we would probably have to work with some restrictions in our demand. So the irrigation may have to be secured. So we would have to monitor that very closely.
Okay. All right. So there are 20 tanks on the facility at any given time. As I understand it, about 5 of those tanks would be empty. When those tanks are empty, do we do regular inspections on those tanks?
Sir, I'd like to have Admiral Stamatopoulos address that one since he's the operator of that facility.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Yes, sir, you are correct. There are 20 tanks. There are 2 tanks that are permanently out of service, tank 1 and 19. Tank 1, I believe, is being used as a potential prototype for second containment lining in the future.
Okay.
There's 2 that are currently undergoing what are calling cleaning, inspection, and repair. There are 8 that are outside the recommended API periodicity, and there are 8 tanks which are currently certified. Now, when a tank goes offline and is drained, it is my understanding that they become in compliance at that time also.
So they're in compliant, but if we refilled them with fuel, then they would no longer be compliant.
This isn't my technical expertise area, but the American Petroleum Institute has a recommended, if you will, recommended periodicity for tanks, which is about 20 years. And so in addition to that, that doesn't necessarily mean, sir, my understanding is that the tanks are unsafe, but there are other mitigations that can be used to assure the tightness of the tank and the integrity of the fuel system.
And a tank is approximately the same size as a large tanker with the actual capacity volume. Is that correct? 15 million gallons.
It's quite a few, sir. I'd have to take that as a lookup and get back to you, but yes, they are quite large tanks. Yes, sir.
So on this operator error, do we know how much fuel was spilled?
If I could, I'll take that, sir. This is, I'm a big converse. So we don't have the specific quantity on the November 20th event of the amount of fuel spilled yet. We expect that to be a part of the investigation that will conclude this week. And once we have that information, we'll share it.
Admiral, my time's expired, but it seems to me, did the operator overfill the tank? Is that what, did they get above the steel liner in the tank?
So the tanks are about 12.5 million gallons. We fill them up to about 10 million gallons. The most recent event, and in fact, the 6 May event, weren't associated with the integrity of the tanks. They were associated with improper operation of the piping systems or auxiliary systems associated with the bulk fuel storage facility, not the integrity of any of the 20 tanks themselves.
Okay. I think that's an important part of this, and I look forward to further discussions. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your patience. I know that I'm 30 seconds over. I yield.
I will hold you accountable, Mr. Scott. We shall move on now. The gavel order going forward is Luria, Green, Kalehi. Ms. Luria, you're up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to reflect back on one of the comments that Ranking Member Waltz made. I think his observation that this doesn't appear to be a one-off crisis, but yet rather a systemic issue, I think is very accurate. And I think those of us on this committee and other committees on armed services who've had the opportunity to discuss a lot of incidents that the Navy has had over recent years, the most recent, of course, being the Connecticut, the Bonhomme Richard, the McCain, Fitzgerald, a lot of other things which, really, if we're talking about this as an operator error, reflect back to some of the same systemic issues that we continue to see over and over again within the Navy. And, as we're talking about defueling the tanks, I'm really quite confused if this was related to operator error. And the particular incident that happened most recently does not have to do with the integrity, structural integrity or condition of the tanks. What purpose does defueling the tanks at this point serve? And my second question on that is, defueling the tanks, although it may happen during, routine operations to defuel in order to inspect, it appears like it's an operation that is not a routine operation. And this happened because of operator error. What additional supervision, additional procedural measures are being put in place during these non-routine operations during this tank draining to ensure that we have extra eyes on and extra measures in place to make sure that we don't have additional incidents?
Okay, ma'am, I'll take that. So first, I think that the insight that Representative Waltz and you have identified that, hey, there seems to be some systemic operational issues. That is precisely why Admiral Paparo pulled this recent November 20th fuel spill up to his level, even though he's not in the chain of command on the management operations or maintenance of this Red Hill facility, and directed the investigation as a senior officer present, because he was concerned that we had a 6 May event. There's a possible relationship to this November 20th event. This is a strategic fuel facility for the entire military, not just the Navy. So we need to understand and not treat these as individual isolated incidents and take minor corrective actions, but treat these as potential systemic issues, get to the root causes and fix those problems. And that's precisely why he directed this investigation, even before we had the water contamination issue. The second piece to that is there risks of operating these tanks and defueling them if we haven't identified the causes of these recent fuel spills and corrected them? I think that's also a concern. It's part of our investigation. It's also part of the third-party assessments that we're conducting that were directed by the emergency order and were actually directed by the Secretary of the Navy. And those are focused on the operations and maintenance of the facility. And it's going to bring in third party. We have gone through the work of soliciting bids for that third-party assessment. And we're going to place them under contract shortly, and they're going to come in with expertise, hopefully, depending on the vendor we select, from the oil and natural gas community, from commercial practices and fuel distribution, and provide a separate assessment of our operations and maintenance to inform the corrective actions that we need to take in manpower, in our operating procedures, in our training, and in the safety features and the design and the environmental protective measures we take of the facility itself to make sure before we start defueling operations or any operations at Red Hill that we can do it safely.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to further, more in-depth conversations about the operational impacts and specifically discussing the strategic importance of having this fuel available in Hawaii for our operations. So thank you to our witnesses today, and I do think that this is part of a much larger systemic issue that we've been seeing repeated occurrences of over recent years in the Navy. So I'm hopeful that this will provide some additional insight, but we also really need to provide not just recommendations, but take action on those corrective actions recommended by investigation after investigation after investigation that has, pointed out these shortfalls in our operating procedures, compliance, and training. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Luria. We now turn to Dr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for putting this committee hearing together. I want to echo your congratulations to my colleague, Mike Walls, for the new member of his family, and of course, for being selected to be the ranking member of this committee. I think it's an excellent choice. Mike, as a former, or as a Green Beret, I guess you're never a former Green Beret, Mike, just like you're never a former Ranger or Marine, understands that readiness is a sort of 5-component to readiness. Right people with the right health and abilities to do the mission, the right equipment, the right training, the right doctrine, and almost probably more importantly, the right leadership. And this issue here at Red Hills hits on many of those components to readiness and thus readiness. And I think the most burning question to me, and I throw it out to any of the members of the panel, right now, this challenge, confronting this challenge, what impact to INDOPACOM's ability to do its mission? What is the impact? Are we deterred in any way in our ability to meet the challenge from China in the Indo-Pacific?
In the short term, there is no immediate impact to our ability to do our mission. Our day-to-day peacetime operations are supplied by our tank farm that's on the waterfront, not associated with the underground tanks with the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. There is going to be a separate brief to the members, and it's going to be at the classified level that's going to address the strategic importance of the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility and its place within the more broad military fuel distribution system. And I'll defer to that to talk about the long-term impact of ceasing operations of Red Hill and of potentially defueling it or shifting the fuel elsewhere.
I would assume then that perhaps discussing the various courses of action that can be taken that are being considered probably could be deferred or punted to that classified briefing. But what I'm very interested in are what are each of the courses of action that you're presenting the decision maker to make? I know earlier you said it was above your, or someone else was making the decision on what to ultimately do. Perhaps in that classified setting, understanding all of the courses of action you guys are considering. If you guys wouldn't mind making sure we talk about that, then that would be helpful. One last question. The Army alerted its soldiers several days ahead of the Navy to stop drinking water, movement of personnel, etc. And I wonder why it took the Navy a few days to echo that or to also initiate that, and who is responsible for that delay?
I'll address that also as the, on the day of the event, the 28th of November, there was, began to receive initial reports within the Navy of individual residents that were affected by some water contamination issue. And the Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hawaii Base Commanding Officer sent teams out to each one of those sites to check on it. And then, unfortunately, at some point, with a small amount of information and not the full scope of an understanding of the impact, he determined that the majority of the distribution system was safe and it was impacting only a small number of residents, and he made that statement that evening. That was incorrect. He subsequently formally apologized for that assessment that he made on the ground based on the limited information he had. I will tell you that the very next day, once I was directed and stood up the Joint Crisis Action Team, my first step was to work directly with the Department of Health and our other service components. And that evening, we put out public health guidance that was aligned with the Department of Health, and it was aligned with inputs from our service components. So, we were all working aggressively to get the right information out. Were there miscues in communications? Yes. And was it impactful to our residents? Yes. And we're going to fix those and our TTPs. It was based on poor information and frankly, poor judgment.
Okay, well, that's an admission then. Appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Mr. Kalehi, you're next up. I note that a couple of other members have joined us, and we'll pick them up in the appropriate gavel. Mr. Kalehi, you're on.
Well, aloha, Chairman Garamendi and Ranking Member Waltz, for organizing this important hearing about Kapu Kaki, otherwise known as Red Hill, and the ongoing water crisis on the island of Oahu. I want to thank the witnesses for appearing before this committee. The last time the Readiness Subcommittee met on December 2nd, 2021, I alerted this committee that the Navy was experiencing a crisis of astronomical proportions in Hawaii. Mr. Chairman, this is not an exaggeration and has proven to be 100% true. Thousands of families have been displaced. Those who unknowingly consume the contaminated water are worried about potential long-term health consequences that they may face. The fuel leak threatens Oahu's federally designated sole source aquifer, which the ranking member correctly stated provides 77% of Oahu's drinking water. So let me be clear. Clean drinking water is national security and cannot be compromised for anything. The facts speak for themselves, and we in Congress must understand the gravity of this situation. We must bring the full power of congressional oversight to bear on the Department of Defense to ensure that the Navy is doing its job of taking care of our service members, civilians, protecting the island's precious water resources, and determining proper management of this strategic asset. I have several important questions to ask our witnesses today, but my first question is directed to Admiral Converse. After it was definitively confirmed that the Red Hill well was contaminated with petroleum, the State of Hawaii Department of Health issued an emergency order on December 6th to the United States Navy to suspend operations and defuel the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. That emergency order was resisted and contested by the United States Navy in late December. On January 3rd, it was reaffirmed by the State of Hawaii Department of Health in its final decision and order. This order has witnessed broad support from the communities of Oahu, the governor, the Department of Health, the State Commission on Water Resource Management, the City and County Board of Water Supply, City Council members, state legislators. In short, Mr. Chairman, the whole of government in Hawaii believes that the Navy should comply with this order. So Admiral Converse, I would like you to reaffirm what you stated in your opening statement. On behalf of the entire state of Hawaii and a united congressional delegation, is the United States Navy going to fully comply with the state of Hawaii's legal order to plan and execute the defueling of the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility?
Sir, thank you. Speaking for my boss, Admiral Paparo, whom I know you know, And immediately upon receiving the order that was finalized on the 3rd of January, Admiral Paparo directed and we issued a tasking order that directs our subordinate commands and our headquarters to take all measures to implement the Department of Health emergency order. The well has been isolated and it will remain isolated until we've taken corrective actions. We're taking actions to establish a filtering system for the Red Hill shaft well. We are aggressively pursuing the third-party assessments directed in the emergency order that will enable us first to identify and fix the problems associated with the operations and maintenance facility that caused the spills and the contamination, and that will allow us then to conduct further fueling and defueling operations, and that will set the conditions for the ability to defuel the plant. We're also conducting a broader third-party assessment in the overall operations and maintenance of the Red Hill facility and the environmental compliance associated with it. All of those actions are in progress in some manner, including the contracts for the third-party assessments.
Well, I appreciate your affirmative answer, Admiral Converse. That is great news, and I'm sure the people of Hawaii greatly appreciate the Navy's commitment to fully comply with that order. Admiral Stamatopoulos, per the January 7th task order from the Commander of the Pacific Fleet, has NAVSUP identified an independent third party to assess the system integrity to develop a work plan and implementation schedule?
Congressman, the technical evaluation process is just completed today. The Department of Health of Hawaii will receive notification of the highest technically rated vendor in that, and then we will seek awarding that contract here shortly after.
Admiral, just the last follow-up to that question. Per the task order, then, that work and implementation schedule is due in 23 days by February 3rd. Do you believe that tasking can be met?
Sir, I believe, and sir, you are very familiar, with the Red Hill location there. It is going to be done. A high-level implementation plan and work schedule is going to be delivered within that time frame. But as you're aware, the complexities of it may require more detailed engineering analysis if that comes to pass within that assessment. But there will be a high-level implementation plan and work plan, if you will, to move forward.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And mahalo, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Before I move on to the gavel order, I want to thank you, Mr. Kalehi. You brought this to the attention of the committee early on. It was at the Reagan Defense Forum that we did set up a meeting with the Secretary of the Navy and the Chief of Naval Operations at your request and your leadership for the people of Hawaii and your very serious and appropriate concerns for them. I hope that we'll be having time to come back to you after we finish the gavel order. There seems to be a few changes in the gavel order. Let me see here. Mr. Moore, you are back, so you're next up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yoshia, thanks, witnesses, for being here. Any of the questions I have can be directed to any of the witnesses. I will defer to you all for who you feel is best to respond. It's military families, and I see this a lot. I have a very important Air Force base in my district, and as I interact with the community, it's apparent, and it's military families. They don't necessarily take the oath of office, but they often are, and the spouses and children, they're forced to confront the hardships of military life. And I share the frustration and outrage of my colleagues that any military family lacked clean drinking water, the most basic necessities. And I hope my colleagues share my desire to identify solutions over sensationalism. And while immediate action, compensation, and remediation may all be necessary in response to this crisis, I would caution us against overreactions that may harm military readiness. So it's long recognized that Hawaii's remote location makes the state particularly susceptible to high commodity prices and supply chain disruptions. This became more clear throughout this pandemic. While much is needed to improve Red Hill's fuel storage capability, what alternatives are available for storing said fuel at a location that is not Red Hill?
I can take that. So I can't prescribe the specific locations. What I can tell you, sir, is there is NDAA language that directs us to conduct a alternative study. And that study is, as I recall, directs to look at sites off of Oahu and off of the islands of Hawaii as well as within Hawaii. So that is a part of the assessment. And I can also tell you that INDOPACOM, who's the combatant commander and responsible for this area of operation, has directed the Defense Logistics Agency, who owns fuel distribution across the globe, to evaluate alternatives for dispersing this fuel and alternative sites for storing or alternative methods for storage, whether it be at a fixed site or within tankers that are globally distributed. So there are a range of efforts to support that question, and they're in progress, or they are being considered, and third-party assessments will be done to execute those assessments.
Excellent, thank you. Well, there's always room to improve, but there's efforts to confront the military family housing crisis, PFAS, contamination. We've shown that the military is ready and capable of meeting challenges in response to crisis and oftentimes public outrage. Do you feel that closing Red Hill is an overreaction to a very legitimate issue that the military is capable of solving themselves?
My perception is that we need to complete our investigation. We need to complete these third-party assessments directed by the Secretary of the Navy and in compliance with the emergency order. And that will allow us to understand the full scope of the issues we had with the current operations of Red Hill. It will allow us to assess the facilities. And some of these studies on alternative options will allow us to understand the risk to national security. And with all of that information, we'll be well poised to make a long-term decision on any subsequent dispersion of the fuel to other sites or decisions associated with the Red Hill facility itself in the long term.
Thank you. And as we kind of started this hearing, and I believe our chairman and both ranking member are committed to it, to being a part of a solution going forward on whatever issues sort of come up. I've enjoyed that part of my experience on this committee and on this subcommittee and HASC in general. The last question that I would pose in solidarity with my very good friend, Rep. Kihile from Hawaii, is what is the Navy doing? Please just articulate a little bit more how to reestablish trust with the Oahu community and reassure the public that the water system is being properly cleaned and treated and going forward.
So I think that's a broad question. The first step is that we have to demonstrate sincerity and transparency and a commitment to fully investigate broadly the recent fuel spills, to identify linkage to events that have happened over the last 5 or 10 years at Red Hill, to understand any systemic issues that are involved with that, and to take aggressive efforts going forward to fully fix those issues. And we need to do that in coordination with our federal regulators, our state regulators, the state and local communities, and the Native Hawaiians. And we need to bring them in as a part of that recovery effort. And first step are these assessments and investigations, identify the corrective actions. And the next step to build that confidence is to apply and commit the resources, the manpower, and the leadership bandwidth to take long-term permanent corrective actions to fix the problems that we identify. And then the last step is, as we've completed these assessments and developed the plans and the environmental remediation, we need to do all of that in very close coordination with the state of Hawaii, the local communities, as well as our federal regulators. And I think if we follow that pattern and that template, we will begin to rebuild confidence that the Navy is here, that we care about the community, we care about the environment, and we care about the people of Hawaii.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, other witnesses. Thanks, Chairman.
For your question. And Admiral, I gave you a little more time to lay that out. I know that's a fundamental question that Mr. Kalehi and Mr. Case wanted to get to, and may come back to that. The gavel order has moved around a little bit here. So let me tell you the way it presently appears. Ms. Strickland, Johnson, and Spear, in that order. Ms. Strickland, you're up. I don't see you on the screen, but if you're there, your turn.
I am here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to enter the article from Task and Purpose titled, "The Navy told this military family they were safe from toxic water. Then both their children ended up in the ER," into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
In this article, one family was told to submit a Freedom of Information Act request for the water test results when trying to get answers. Vice Admiral Lindsay, thank you for your testimony. And we all know that we are here because we are fighting for a nation that is safe, just, and secure for those who serve in the military and for our civilian families. Can you please tell us, Vice Admiral, how you are communicating with those who've been affected, and how will you ensure that service members and their families will have full and complete answers for their questions?
Yes, ma'am. We're communicating and have been communicating over many different venues, social media, through press releases. I've had multiple town hall meetings in housing areas, and then have a very robust website that people can go on and can see a wealth of information to include the test results. Any test results that have been validated by the Department of Health, by the EPA, by the Navy, and our sister services are posted on that website and readily available to all the members of the community. And so that's the transparency that we're pursuing. As been previously mentioned, that's the trust and the confidence that we're working to rebuild with our families. We understand that we impinged on that, and we take that seriously, and we are working diligently to restore it.
Great. Well, thank you for your response. And I would like to yield any remaining time I have to my colleague, Representative Kahele.
Hello, Representative Strickland, and I really appreciate the extra time. And I will stay on the subject that you started on in terms of readiness, because this is a readiness hearing, and it's important that we talk about those thousands of military families who have been displaced over the holidays. My question is directly to Admiral Lindsay. Since November 29th, our service members who have been living frankly, a nightmare. They were told that they could return home by Christmas. That's what the Navy initially said. That never happened. Then the new year passed, and so I'm asking for the thousands of military families and also civilian families, some of them who are living in homes without running water, others who have been displaced to alternate lodging, and many who are either staying down in Waikiki or in area hotels. When can those civilian and military families expect to go back to their homes, to have a home that is safe to be in, that has clean running water, and they can have the full confidence that it's safe to move back? Do you have an idea of when that is, Admiral Lindsay?
Yes, sir. We want to make sure that the homes have drinkable water. And so we're working diligently with our partners at the Hawaii Department of Health and the EPA and our fellow services to, once we attain that drinkable water and it is safe to use, then that those families that have chosen to displace will be able to return to their homes. We expect that to begin occurring here in late January and proceed through the middle of February. Original estimates were not accurate because of the scope and scale with which we had to address the water system, again, in conjunction with our partners. And so that is the current timeline, late January to early February. And that schedule is posted on our website so folks can see it and be well aware of it. And we communicate that through the various venues we've been using to communicate.
All right, thank you for that question. And Chairman, I can't see the time, so when I do hit my the remaining time left from my colleague from Washington State, can you please let me know?
You have 2
I'll
minutes.
go 2 minutes. All right. Thank you, sir. I'll go to a follow-on question for Admiral Stamatopoulos. And this talks about the structural integrity of the Red Hill tanks. In your earlier answer, you discussed the 20 Red Hill tanks. And it's important for my colleagues to know that there are 2 tanks that have not been in operation for many, many years, tanks number 1 and tanks number 19. Tank number 1 is the proposed prototype if there were to be a secondary containment type of prototype to be done. But when looking at the other 18 tanks that are or could be potentially put into operation, tanks number 3, number 4, and number 11 have not been inspected for approximately 40 years. So my question to NAVSUP is, or Navy Supply Systems Command, is why are these tanks still in operation, and how can you assure this committee and the people of Hawaii that tanks 3, 4, and 11 that have not even been looked at in the last 40 years are safe to use and meet current API 653 guidelines for bulk fuel storage underground facilities?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. Yes, you are correct. There are tanks, as you mentioned, that have been out of periodicity for quite a long time. The AP, as I'm not an expert within the API area, however, the API 563, of course, is a recommendation, best commercial practice, and after an inspection is completed, that could be then the next inspection 20 years, as you're aware. In these cases, all of these tanks are on a schedule to be, which is put throughout the ecosystem, all the way up into DLA Energy, NAVFAC, CNIC, NAVSUP, the geographic combatant commanders around the globe through their joint petroleum offices, and they are aware of this. There are, as you know, sir, there are certain requirements for baseline activities, current operations, and then there are also war reserve requirements. So through that process, there are, if you will, shared risks, if you will, to determine which tanks will be up next in the clean, inspect, and repair cycle. And all that has to be balanced, if you will, with the geographic combatant commander's risk comfort, if you will.
Great. Well, I would recommend that tanks 7 and 8 be the next on those lists, because those tanks are 4 years overdue from their last clean inspect repair that was done back in 1998. And there's a series of tanks, several of them, that were all done clean inspect repair in the late 1990s. And I don't know if that inspection repair process done well over 20 years ago complies with current API 653 or Department of Defense Unified Facilities criteria for underground bulk fuel storage facilities, nor do I think that any of those tanks have the required or the suggested polysulfide modified Novolac epoxy solution that has been applied to the interior of those tanks. So that would be my humble suggestion. But thank you, and I will yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Kalehi. We're going to turn now to Ms. Hang on just a second. The gavel order keeps changing on me here. We're going to turn to Spear and Case, but before I go there, there are going to be a whole series and of specific requirements, information, questions like you have just raised, Mr. Kalehi. The committee will continue to work directly with the Navy on all of the details, the engineering details, the issues of inspections, as well as the question of operators. We'll work on that on a daily, weekly basis, and we'll come back at this in a classified hearing, probably in about a month. We'll deal with that. Ms. Spear, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question can be addressed to whomever is appropriately to answer. We've heard from families that they are receiving notices from TRICARE, from the TRICARE contractor, asking beneficiaries to submit third-party claims for the care they were provided after exposure. is the Navy prepared to address the follow-on costs associated with this disaster?
So I'll take that. So in terms of have we budgeted for the cost of this event? Clearly, we have not. What is going to be the impact of any third-party claims? I don't have that information, but I'd be happy to take that for the record and get back to you on the details of both what we expect or estimate to be the cost, how we're adjudicating them, and how we're going to pay for them. I don't have that information passed to you right now.
All right. If you would do that and provide it to the committee, but I'm also want clarification that all the follow-on care will be paid for by the Navy for any exposure that people sustain.
So I think that we can talk about Admiral Lindsay can talk very quickly about the claims process associated with that. And our Doc McGinnis can talk about the medical care for our active duty service members who are being treated. So first I'll go to Admiral Lindsay.
Well, actually, I don't necessarily want to hear that. I just want confirmation that any aftercare third-party claims will be paid for by the federal government, specifically the Navy.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. The claims are open. People can come and file claims, and they will be paid for by the U.S. Navy.
And how are you communicating with the families that this claims process is available?
Through our website, through town halls, through social media, and also for those in housing, directly through the management companies that talk to them on a regular basis.
I'm sure my good colleague, Mr. Cahaley, is also putting it on his website because that's a good way to make sure they're aware of it. My next questions are to Admiral Stamatopoulos. In regard to the Red Hill fuel operation, were there any formal complaints preceding the leaks filed between May 2021 and November 2021 warning about the safety or any other pre-existing hazardous conditions?
Ma'am, I'm aware that there is an ongoing investigation, which I am not privy to. This is separate and apart from the commander of the Pacific Fleet's investigation, which addresses, I think, the topic that you are raising. So the answer to you is yes. There's what I understand, an OGC investigation or IG investigation directly looking into that.
So the committee now is aware that there were complaints and warnings filed before the leak was finally addressed. Is that correct?
I don't know ma'am, I don't know the specifics of what the claims were. Again, I'm not privy to that. All I know is that there is a investigation and legal matter which is outside my field of view that involves employees of the Red Hill complex.
All right. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, there might be a way for us to have some kind of briefing from the IG. My next question, have you reviewed the command climate surveys for Red Hill?
No, ma'am, I have not seen the most recent command climate survey. I'd have to go back and look and see. I do get briefings when the change of commands occur, and they go through surveys, but I have not. I'm not familiar with the most recent one. I'll have to go back and look and refresh my memory.
Thank you. I would ask that you review the command climate surveys and report back to the committee on what you found. Do you have any awareness of a toxic work environment at Red Hill, including harassment, discrimination, or any other behavior in which employees reported were unable to carry out their daily operations of Red Hill safely and per the procedures?
Again, ma'am, what I know I have just shared with you in the committee. That's under investigation and is outside my immediate field of view, as I may be called in to be a disposition authority there. So I just do not have that detailed information that you're seeking at this point.
All right. I think we all appreciate your follow through with those questions and respond to the committee. Thank you. My time's expired and I yield back.
Ms. Spear, as chair of the Personnel Subcommittee, if you need additional time with an additional question, you have it now.
I guess my follow-up question then, Mr. Chairman, would be, what are the qualifications for the roles of senior Navy officer leadership at the facility? Are the commanding officers and/or executive officers that are assigned to Red Hill trained in petroleum management?
I'll take that question, ma'am. The answer is no. Commanding officers and executive officers do not undergo specific detailed training in petroleum management. They do receive briefings and some basic training for that, but I would not consider them to be petroleum experts. That said, the current commanding officer of Fleet Logistics Center does happen to be the most experienced supply corps officer, in my professional estimation, to have fuels experience.
So moving forward, is there a recognition that having that kind of expertise would be appropriate?
Ma'am, I would say,
Kind of training?
yes, ma'am, I would say that is, well, I'm not, I don't have insight into the PAC fleet investigation, but I can assure you that it's highly likely that the team is looking into all aspects to include the training, as will the Safety and Investigation Board, which was convened yesterday. And as some of the members previously pointed out in their observations with regard to operations and maintenance and training, it really calls for a detailed look of doctrine, organization, training, material solutions, leader development, which is your specific concern there, personnel, facilities. There is quite a bit that we have to take a hard look at that. We have to get real, and we have to understand through these investigations, through the third-party assessments, where we need to get better, and then move out aggressively with humility to make that happen. I hope that answers your questions, but we owe that to the entire Department of Defense across all fuel facilities.
All right, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Needless to say, Ms. Spear, we will follow up on all of those questions, as well as the other questions raised by the members. Having completed the round of members of the committee, we now turn to Mr. Case. It is your turn. Thank you very much for joining the hearing. I know that you, together with Mr. Kalehi, have been on this issue from the very outset. You've been outspoken. You've provided all of us with information as well as motivation. Mr. Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, for allowing me to participate in this this subcommittee's critical hearing here. This issue is one of the most single important issues for our delegation, for the people of Hawaii, for our leaders, of any that we face in Hawaii today. And the fact that this subcommittee takes it that seriously is of great comfort to us in Hawaii. And I would say this is not only a matter of the health and safety of hundreds of thousands of residents of Hawaii and visitors to Hawaii, but it is critical to the support, confidence, and trust of the people of Hawaii in the U.S. military and in our mission in the Indo-Pacific. And this is certainly an important ingredient in this subcommittee's focus on the readiness of our military. There must be an alternative to Red Hill. This subcommittee is very deeply involved in what the best alternative to that is. Admiral Converse, thank you for your confirmation to Representative Kahele, my partner in the delegation on this, that the Navy will comply with the emergency order. And he asked you that direct question and you went on at some length, but I just want a yes or no answer. Am I correct in assuming from your answer, which Congressman Kahele also assumed, that the Navy will comply with the emergency order?
Sir, yes, we are complying with the emergency order, and we have already begun taking steps along every one of the lines directed in the order.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Does the Navy acknowledge, agree and agree that the state of Hawaii has the legal authority to regulate Red Hill under both federal and state law?
So I am not, I don't think I'm in a position to make a decision on whether who has the authority between the federal and state regulators. What I can tell you is that we recognize that the Department of Health emergency order directing specific elements associated with the Red Hill is a legal order, and we are complying.
Admiral, I know that you perhaps are not in a position to answer the question fully, but certainly this hearing is being closely monitored by the Department of Defense's personnel as well as lawyers. And I would ask for a specific confirmation from them that the state of Hawaii has the legal authority to implement and enforce its emergency order. And I think that's important for this reason, Admiral. I appreciate and commend the Navy on agreeing to comply with the emergency order, but this is coming off as a voluntary compliance, and a voluntary compliance can at some point in the future be reversed, and that is the fear of the state of Hawaii. And so I would strongly urge the Navy and the Department of Defense, as you analyze your clear legal options in terms of the emergency order, to confirm that the state of Hawaii does in fact have this authority. That's my strong advice to you. That's my request to you. Let me move on to the actual implementation of the emergency order. The emergency order requires the Navy, as Congressman Kelly stated, to within 23 days come up with an implementation schedule, including a plan of defueling, following which the Department of Health and also the EPA and others will evaluate that plan. And once that plan is approved, you are required under the emergency order, which you say you're going to comply with, to defuel within 30 days after that. Do you have an estimate of how long it will take for you to implement a defueling order, first of all? And second, are you intimately involved right now, you collectively, in the actual funding requests that it's going to take to implement that order? And I say this with great concern that, to my knowledge, with the exception of one request to Congress in my Appropriations Committee for some emergency funding for some of your initial actions, to my knowledge, there's been no formal request to Congress beyond that. And I have no idea where exactly the Department of Defense stands right now in terms of the President's own budget request for FY23. And I believe that there should be a very significant request in the President's budget to implement the emergency order.
So, Congressman Case, first, I want to thank you for your advocacy and understanding of the timeline. Yes, are we concerned that this is a very aggressive timeline to conduct this third-party assessment and to develop the schedule and the work plan? Yes. We are pursuing the issuing of this contract soonest, and as soon as that contract's issued, we will get the right folks in touch with the vendors, and we will make immediate decisions on what's the timeline, how do we get a short-term work schedule and a scope of the work that needs to be done to correct any deficiencies associated with the operations, maintenance, facility, safety, to be able to defuel. And as soon as we have that scoping work done, we understand the importance of getting that to the right people so we can start budgeting for that or making decisions in the current year's budget. And I don't have any more information on that other than that we recognize that the timelines are short and we recognize the linkage to the budgeting cycle and that we need to get those inputs to you soonest. And I thank you for your advocacy.
Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Case. I would point out to all the committee that we have not yet completed the appropriation process for the current year, let alone for the coming year. And the NDAA, while completed, is not an appropriation. So we're going to undoubtedly in the days ahead, as we approach February 18th, this issue may occur for all of us to deal with in the next month and a half. Mr. Waltz, I see that Mr. Bergman is back, and the opportunity is his to ask questions for 5 minutes. Mr. Bergman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening the entire time. I may not have been on camera. My apologies for not being visible, but I do not have any questions at this time, other than to say in our role as the Readiness Subcommittee, if your servicemen and women and your families are not ready, we're not ready as a country. So I know that through the collaboration of our oversight and the service's desire and understanding of their mission to be ready, you'll do the right thing. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Mr. Waltz, you laid out at your opening 5 points that determine readiness. I suspect that that'll be printed and on my desk the next time we do a hearing, so that I'm constantly reminded of where you're going with this. We now have a second round available. That would start with me. I'm not going to ask another question. I want to compliment the members of the committee and Mr. Case for the questions that you've put forth. I will simply state that the committee staff, both sides of the aisle, will be following this very closely, and we will be looking for very specific answers to the questions that have been raised, and we will be following the timeline of that have been laid out by the Navy and by the state of Hawaii. There is a question of legal responsibility here that will become part of the future hearings and part of the work of this committee. Since there are the issue of a state authority versus federal authority and the military itself, this will be a fundamental question, the resolution of which will be unknown. But it is of intense interest by all of the states and territories, as well as to the Department of Defense. Also, I want to put on the record that the classified hearing will be taking place as soon as we get some clarity from the Navy and from the Department of Defense, all of the services, as to how to deal with logistics associated with Red Hill. I would expect that hearing to take place within the next month to month and a half. The second, that'll be classified. The second point is that the past NDAAs lay out clarity in what was known as the Oath Act, that exposure to toxic will be part of the military record for all the military personnel. It does not include families, although there are issues before this committee as well as Ms. Spears' committee having to do with families that have been exposed to toxics in the past. I would alert the members of the committee that those issues are alive. They will be part of the next NDAA, and we will be debating that going forward. There are several facilities that have a history of exposure to families, and that will be taken up going forward. With that, I now turn to Mr. Waltz. You have a second round of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll reserve, I have a number of questions, and I'm really looking forward to that classified session. I just will state as we head into that, head towards that session, I am incredibly concerned that the Navy, we all know that Red Hill was established and been in operation since World War II, and I'm incredibly concerned that the Navy's using a World War II era logistics strategy for use in a future conflict in an A2AD environment. And I'm particularly concerned that the Defense Department is malpositioned its fuels laydown across Indo-PACOM, most notably with this incredibly high concentration of bulk fuels at Red Hill. So I'll be looking forward to hearing what steps the Navy, DLA, the department writ large is taking to better align this laydown with to deal with future conflict and with the Indo-PACOM commander's requirements. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield.
Mr. Waltz, welcome to the committee. We've been spending a great deal of time of the committee and staff looking at those questions as we pivot to the Pacific. So your interest is going to help us along the way. We are beginning a second round. The hearing, I believe, was scheduled for 3 hours. At the top of the hour, maybe 5 minutes after the top of the hour, I will have to leave for a few moments. I'm looking for the most senior member on the Democratic side to take over sometime around 5 minutes to 10 minutes after the hour. In the meantime, Jeannie just told me that we are actually a 2-hour hearing, not a 3-hour hearing. So we have up on the second round Luria, Leahy, and Case. I think, Mr. Bergman, unless you have questions, you've opted out of questions. Mr. Luria, you're up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And after listening to some of the follow-on testimony, especially my colleagues from Hawaii, I understand the incredible importance of securing the safety of the water supply, and absolutely believe that everything must be done to clean up the contamination that's happened and to mitigate something like this from happening again. But I am a little bit concerned with the timeline that was laid out, specifically as described by Mr. Case. And, when Admiral Converse was speaking earlier, and he talked about having a third party do a full analysis as part of the investigation. A contract hasn't even been let for that. And that could take months in and of itself to let that contract have this analysis done, these recommendations. And it seems like the timeline that Mr. Case was describing was much more aggressive. So I'd really like to understand, although the Navy has said that they'll comply with this order, is the timeline that was described actually realistic? Because to me, it looks like it would be at least 6 months before you get to the point where you could have these recommendations. Another 6 months before you might start emptying the fuel tanks. Then, the amount of time it takes for that, 250 or so million gallons of fuel, that we could be looking at a year, much more than a year, even potentially, that the operations of Red Hill are impacted. And earlier on, you said that there's no immediate impact. Can you quantify what point in time there will actually be an impact to the operations? And I'm glad that Admiral Converse is here, because although this is not in the chain of command of PAC Fleet, the operational impact side of it is definitely within your purview, Admiral. And if you could just talk a little bit about the realisticness, and that might be NAVFAC or NAVSUP on that side of the timeline for this, but then Admiral Converse, the operational impact of that timeline, if it in fact is more protracted than what we've been talking about.
Yes, ma'am. The initial assessment I saw back in the early December was that up through January, February timeframe, the operational impact of not operating the Red Hill fuel facility, other than for sustenance and safety environmental monitoring, was minimal. Beyond that, we don't start incurring costs associated at the Defense Logistics Agency associated with the inability to use that facility to manage the global distribution of fuel in conjunction with all the other fuel points. I don't have details at my fingertips on what those costs are and what the risks to national security associated with continued non-operation of the Red Hill fuel facility beyond January, February. I do know that that assessment is undergoing, and the Defense Logistics Agency is conducting that in support of the commander of Indo-PACOM, and he's being briefed on that. And My understanding was that that will be a part of any discussion that comes up in the classified forum.
Thank you. And I'm still unclear on this particular aspect of it because we've repeatedly said through the hearing that the recent spill contamination and then the one that happened earlier were due to operator error. So I'm not quite understanding the necessity to empty the tanks in order to have the corrective actions necessary to, ensure safe operation for use of the tanks for operational needs of the Navy. They don't seem to go together. And can you explain why there is a necessity to empty the tanks in order to have sufficient corrective actions to minimize operational impact?
I can't speculate on the Department of Health's determination as to the necessity to empty the tanks by secure operations. But I suspect it was just due to a general concern that, hey, there's fuel over the aquifer. But I'd be speculating on the Department of Health's determination that drove development of the emergency order. And I don't have that insight. What I do know is that in compliance with that emergency order, the timeline is very aggressive to conduct this work plan and schedule. Our goal is to get the vendor together, consult with the Department of Health, understand the detail that they need within 30 days, vice the long-term assessment that this third-party activity will do. Because clearly, whatever steps we take moving forward associated with Red Hill, the first step needs to be to identify and to validate the problems that led to these two spills and to fix them fully before we do any fuel transfer operations or defueling operations. And I think we would all agree that that needs to be done and it needs to be airtight before we move to the next step of continuing operations, whether it be for defueling.
Very good. Ms. Lurie, you've got 13 seconds.
Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I'm going to hold tight to the 5-minute rule here for the remainder of this. In the second round, Mr. Kalehi, you're up.
Mahalo, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question that I think is on the minds of many, many people in the community, especially on the island of Oahu, and that talks about the current Red Hill well recovery and remediation plan. Last Thursday, I led a Red Hill tour with area legislators and saw the 8 very large granulated activated carbon filtration tanks that are set up right outside the Red Hill well. For the committee's awareness, Mr. Chairman, these tanks can filter up to 5 million gallons of water per day. And it is my understanding that if this plan is approved, that the Navy will begin drawing and filtering millions of gallons of water and subsequently discharging that water into the nearby Halawa stream. And they will commence this as early as the 20th of January. I have serious reservations about releasing such a high volume of treated water into the stream due to the possible unintended consequences and downstream effects. I understand that this final plan must be approved by all parties, signatories, as part of the interagency drinking water system team. That includes the Hawaii Department of Health, the EPA's Region 9, the Navy, and the Army will all need to sign this plan. In addition, a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit will also need to be issued. I would highly suggest that whenever those 4 very important signatories come to an agreement on how to remediate and recover this well, that before any water is pulled out of the Red Hill well to be filtered, that they fully brief people of Hawaii, the residents of the island of Oahu, before commencing, so that they can instill what my colleague, Representative Case, highlighted, which is confidence and trust that this is the best plan available. So I guess my question would be directed to Admiral Converse or Admiral Korka. What are the alternatives to discharging millions of gallons of treated water into the Halawa stream?
Yes, sir, I can take that question. And first and foremost, thanks for visiting the site. It went a very long way, and I hope you had a good appreciation that we are working this together. And hopefully the feedback that you got is that we're not doing this alone. And as you mentioned, before we execute anything, we want to make sure that everyone is aware and supportive of our way ahead. And our remediation efforts right now is the immediate solution. So we actually are taking the trade-offs of risk very seriously. Controlling the plume or, discharging the water in the Halawa stream. And so that's why we've been in such close coordination with all the agencies you mentioned, as well as the University of Hawaii, because we're actually contracting with them to study the ecology on the aquatic life of the stream before, during, and after, so we can make sure we're very mindful of that. And presently, at this time, we're actually in the process of awarding a contract to a local firm here to get an appreciation on what can we do, what are the options available for that water. Because as you highlighted, water is a commodity, is something very precious, and we don't want to waste that discharge. And so today I don't have the best answer for you, sir, but I will tell you that we will brief you as you requested on our plan, and we hope to have some other options available.
Well, thank you for that answer. I will also add that the Halawa stream discharges near Hotel Pier into Pearl Harbor, and between where the Navy proposes to discharge that water into the stream and where it actually flows into Pearl Harbor, there are people that fish in that stream. There are people that crab in that stream, and that is why I think the Navy should make sure the public is well aware before that discharge commences. And I'll just take the last 30 seconds, Mr. Chairman, to thank all the witnesses for being here today. I want to impress on you, like we have been doing for the last 2 months as a united delegation, that we are at an inflection point for the Hawaii's and the state of Hawaii's public trust and relationship with the United States military moving forward. And up until now, that credibility and trust has been put to the test. And so I really appreciate your attendance today, and thank you for answering our questions. I look forward to working with you and the Department of Defense in the future. Mahalo, and I'll yield back.
Mr. Kalei, thank you for your leadership, your intense interest in this, and your determination to protect your citizens and all in Hawaii. We now turn to Mr. Case for the final 5 minutes, then the meeting will adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I could not have said it better what Congressman Kahele said in the last 30 seconds. I completely endorse what he said. I also thank you again for allowing me to participate and for your interest in this issue. There's a little confusion, I think, based on the discussion in the hearing as to what the emergency order requires and does not require. And I want to take the time to make sure everybody's on the same page on that. And I'm just reading from the emergency order here. Within 30 days of receipt of this emergency order, the Navy shall submit a work plan and implementation schedule prepared by a qualified independent third party approved by the department to assess the facility operations and system integrity to safely defuel the bulk fuel storage tanks. Upon the department's approval, that's the Department of Health, of the assessment work plan and implementation schedule, conduct the necessary repairs and make necessary changes in operations to address any deficiencies identified in the assessment and work plan. And then within 30 days of completion of required corrective actions, defuel the bulk fuel storage tanks at the facility. So the time frame here is within 30 days after the emergency order, which Admiral Converse has confirmed twice now the Navy will comply with. That date is February 2nd. They are to submit a work plan and implementation schedule. That is ambitious, but it must be met. It's part of the order, it's critical, and I know that the Navy is going to do its very best to achieve that. If there are any questions that need to be addressed in terms of things that were not fully considered within that time frame, they can easily be addressed afterwards in discussions with the Department of Health. The time frame for the Department of Health to review and consider that work plan and implementation schedule is not set forth with specificity in the order, but we all expect that it will be done as soon as possible and as diligently as possible. But once that work plan is approved, then the Navy shall defuel within 30 days. That's what the order says, and that's what we all need to focus on. So that's what's involved here. I want to use my remaining time to make 3 points. The first point, besides thanking the witnesses and the Navy, it has been a very, very good and transparent process with the Navy over the last weeks and months as the Navy and we all faced this crisis. We appreciate, Admiral Converse, your efforts. I want to say from that perspective, you started off by saying, and I credit you for this, the Navy caused this problem, the Navy owns it, and the Navy will fix it. I have no doubt about the sincerity of the Navy in saying that it will fix it, and the belief of the Navy that it can fix it. However, I do, at this point, have to ask the question whether the Navy has the necessary objectivity to fix it. And so therefore, the request of the congressional delegation and others for qualified independent people to look over the Navy's shoulder to determine that the Navy's proposal to fix this is critical all around, not only to getting the fix right, but to earning the trust and confidence that Congressman Cahelli spoke eloquently to. That's number one. Number two, I would strongly urge you not to focus exclusively on operator error. I have said this to the Secretary of the Navy. I've said it to other folks during the course of this discussion. There may well have been errors by the operators at Red Hill, but to confine the explanation simply to operator error is to ignore what is clearly issues with respect to the operation and maintenance, and perhaps even the direct design of Red Hill. Operator error can be avoided by adequate design, by adequate maintenance, and by so to focus only on operator error, I strongly suggest to you is the wrong way to go on this. Number three, I want to go back to my point on adequate funding, because we've had a great discussion this morning, and I have no doubt of the sincerity of the Navy to address Red Hill. However, the ultimate test of the sincerity of the military is adequate funding requests in the Department of Defense's budget that the Department of Defense will fight for in the Office of Management and Budget and in the President's overall allocation of resources, and not at the expense of critical needs in the Indo-Pacific. We just finished in the NDAA an increase in the Pacific Deterrence Initiative from $5 billion to $7.1 billion, and I do not believe that the fixes to Red Hill should be taken out of overall readiness in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Your final point, I see Mr. Waltz with a big smile on his face going, amen. Mr. Waltz, do you want to take a few moments and wrap, and then I will shut this down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses and the member interest. I said it a couple of times. I'll say it again. I think this needs to be nested in a broader strategy that I think is long overdue, and that you've been working on for some time, and very much looking forward to that discussion. And I think Representative Case is absolutely right. Where the rubber meets the road is where the money to implement that strategy is going to come from. So thank you so much. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. This committee will pursue this issue aggressively and timely. We will have a classified hearing, hopefully within about a month. And that'll be, a classified briefing. It will not be a formal hearing. And we will have the information necessary to answer many of the questions. That part of the information that can be made public will be made public. Between now and that classified briefing, we will also make sure that the ongoing work of the Navy is transparent to the public in Hawaii, and importantly, to the members of this committee. And so staff will be following very, very closely, and we'll be receiving timely updates as this progresses. I consider this to be a major problem for all the reasons stated by the members, and we will pursue it vigorously through all of the various questions and concerns that have been raised. I do want to thank the witnesses. We had 4 fleet flag officers here. That is not normal. So we know that the Navy is serious about it. So for Admiral Converse, Lindsay, Gorka, and Stampopoulos, excuse me, mispronounced that again, and for Captain McGinnis, thank you so very much for participating and for getting up at a very early hour. I didn't see too many coffee cups on the table as you were testifying. Perhaps you did that off camera. In any case, thank you so very much. With that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.